Hi, I'm Michael Jacko. I'm the assistant conductor of the Youth Orchestras of Prince William, and I'm here with John Devlin, who's the music director of YOPW, and also the conductor of the Youth Symphony Orchestra. So John, why don't you tell us about the first concert? It's called Symphonic Shakespeare, and we also have a special guest joining us.
Yeah. So throughout the years, many composers have modeled their pieces on the works of William Shakespeare. The stories are so exciting and there's so much drama inherent in them, and composers like to test their mettle by seeing how well they can depict the story. So I've picked two of those that I've liked the best in the orchestral repertoire. The first one is by Felix Mendelssohn, a German romantic composer who set a whole suite of incidental music to the story A Midsummer Night's Dream. The Youth Symphony is going to play just the overture to that set, which is actually a very famous piece, and it sets a lot of different moods. It's quite exciting in the way that the opening is very, for hushed strings playing very quickly, sets a kind of magical atmosphere, and as you know, the piece is filled with magic, as is the story. And then it kind of opens up into broad melodies and themes as the different characters are introduced. The second piece we're doing is Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet. It's called a fantasy overture. And as you know, the story of Romeo and Juliet, if you go to the theater, takes about 3 hours to tell. Well, Tchaikovsky figures out a way to tell you the story in about 20 minutes, and it contains all the drama of the Romeo and Juliet story that we all know well. There's a famous love theme that's quite beautiful and features Tchaikovsky's kind of lush orchestration. And then we've got dueling swords, and you hear the clash in the cymbals as the two sides, the Capulets and the Montagues, fight. The piece begins and ends with music that harkens back to Friar Lawrence and kind of mirrors the tragedy that is inherent in the story. And you mentioned a special guest, and we do have a special guest joining us. Gabriel Lefkowitz, who is the fantastic young concertmaster of the Knoxville Symphony in Tennessee, is coming up to play Ravel Tzigane. It's a really flashy showpiece for solo violin and orchestra, and we're excited that Gabriel will be coming up to work both with the students and then perform in the concert with us in November at the Hilton Center. So we're really excited about the way the first concert is shaped up.
So we have a lot of exciting events planned in the spring with the YSO, in part to celebrate your inaugural season as music director, and one of the events is actually a tour. It's very exciting. Why don't you tell us about that?
Great. Well, like you said, the spring is going to be filled with many fun events for the orchestra. We've got our second concert of the year in February, the New York tour, which kind of culminates with a performance at Carnegie Hall in March, right before Easter, and then we'll have our season-ending concert in May. And the orchestra, based on the auditions that I heard, is going to be really good this year. And we've actually both worked with the orchestra a little bit so far in the first weeks at rehearsal. So I wanted to challenge them a little bit, and the big classical piece we're going to play is Brahms' Fourth Symphony. And Brahms is very familiar to both you and me, and the Fourth Symphony is one of my personal favorites. So I thought it was a very appropriate piece to kind of open my tenure with the orchestra with, and that will be the centerpiece of the Carnegie Hall concert. Something else I very strongly believe in as a music director of an American orchestra is to commission young American composers. And one of those that I believe in very strongly is Eric Nathan, who recently graduated from Cornell and is now freelancing as a composer in New York City. You and I have run the orchestra at University of Maryland together, where we commissioned and premiered a couple of his pieces already, and so he writes fantastically well for orchestra. And based on Eric's expertise at writing for young groups especially, I thought he'd be the perfect composer to premiere one of his works in New York City. So his new piece, written specifically for YOPW, is called Glimpse, and I haven't caught a glimpse of it yet because he hasn't written it yet, but I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. And we've been in touch actually a lot this week about the instrumentation we're going to use, and he's actually going to feature the percussion section a lot because we have so many talented percussionists at YOPW. And they're really looking forward to the tour and to playing Eric's piece, and I know that he's excited to work with the group. And he's actually going to come down in February and run some of the rehearsals with us and lend his ear to the creative process as we rehearse the piece. And it's just always great when the composer and the orchestra and musicians can interact, and for me as well to learn his thought process behind the piece and be able to have him introduce the work with me to an audience both in Virginia and then in New York.